Hey everyone, my name is Ash. I used to play soccer for Australia and now I am a full-time yoga and meditation teacher. Growing up, I was active, I was competitive, and I couldn't sit still for like 3 seconds. Meditation changed my life, but if I go back to the beginning of my journey, it wasn't an easy one. And so what I want to share in this video is a concept I came across that changed my experience of meditation forever. And my hope is that in understanding this concept, you can go into your meditation practice with far more confidence and far more clarity. So I hope this helps you as it did me. Enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome to Meditation Insight number 1. So I want to start at the very beginning of your practice, before you even start, before you even close your eyes. Because if we fail to set ourselves up correctly, it's almost like we're doomed before we even start. And it can feel much harder to have the experience of meditation, let alone enjoy it. So we must enter with the right understanding. Many of us do go in blind, and it's not a bad thing, but we can make the experience much more pleasant if a few things are explained to us to guide us, to help us, to assist us on our inwards journey. Remember, meditation is not meant to feel like punishment or like a chore. So I want to clear something up in this first conversation to give you a far better chance of enjoying your meditation practice. And in some ways, this does feel like the most important point because it sets up everything that will follow. So what I want to talk about in this episode is meditation expectation. It is only your expectation of meditation that makes it feel like we're failing at it, or creates the storyline that we suck at it, because everyone else from the outside might look like they're having some kind of blissful Buddha-like experience. And even though I couldn't possibly know what's happening for them or what their experience is actually like, what I know for sure is that my experience is nothing like it. And so when we fail to understand the function of meditation and maybe fail to align our expectation in accordance with that function, like many, we might try meditation once or twice and never go back. Because why would we stick with something if it just feels like we're failing at it? And so, like many, we're left believing that it just isn't for us. It feels like something reserved for just the pure and just the spiritual people. So let's explore this, because what I believe, simply by virtue of being human, meditation is absolutely for you. We just need to find the right understanding. So, there is a belief out there that when we close our eyes to meditate and we go inside, we're supposed to end up in some calm, peaceful, Buddha-like Zen state. And this is a gross misconception about meditation. And it's not that those states aren't possible, they absolutely are. And you might even catch glimpses of them early on in your meditation practice and experience. It's just that the majority of our experiences, especially early on as new meditators, and especially if, we've spent the majority of our lives in states of stress, which, by the way, pretty much includes everyone. No one is quite immune to the stress-inducing state of the modern world. So our initial meditation experience is most likely going to be far from this mighty, blissful, Zen, Buddha-like vision. And there's very, very good reason for this. We have to understand, and when I say we, what I mean is we as people who are committed to remaining relevant in the world, not renouncing the world or going off to a monastery or like a cave, but we as people who want to remain relevant to the world and significant in our contribution to it, who want to be in relationship, who want to be of service to the world and dream big, our metric of success in meditation is going to be far from that of maybe enlightenment in the traditional sense of a purely inward journey. And I'll touch more on this point, like the goal, if we can use that word when we're speaking about meditation, but later on. So day to day, of course, our minds are going to feel so busy. We ask so much of ourselves during our waking hours. And so when we close our eyes and decide to meditate, the last thing we can expect is for our mind to just fall silent. It would be nice if that's how it worked, just the noble choice to meditate, instantly creating an inner peaceful experience. But in reality, it really isn't such a reasonable expectation for us to expect that all activity just comes to this abrupt halt because, we've decided it's like meditation o'clock. It's time to meditate. Therefore, all thoughts stop right there. It's just not how it works. And so, if anything, what we find is silence on the outside often means a far louder voice on the inside. And what I mean by that is closing our eyes to meditate tends to only highlight just how fast, how busy, how sporadic, how kind of incessant our thinking minds actually are, because now we have a platform from which to witness, observe, and watch. And what we're watching and witnessing is actually what's always already there. It's just that it's usually going on way back in the background. And so the function of meditation, therefore, we could say, is to bring the background into the foreground and let the foreground fade into the background. So in other words, when I speak about the foreground, I am speaking to everything in our external world. And everything in our external world tends to influence the bulk of our attention. And when we close our eyes and start the process of meditation, all of that, which tends to occupy the bulk of our mental space, our mind, starts to get softer and fainter and softer and fainter until it fades. And everything in your internal world, which we're referring to as your usual background, which is often referred to as your subtle world or subtle body, the body inside the physical body as we know it, all of that which we cannot actually see, touch, or feel, we bring into the spotlight. And so it's the part of us that is not as tangible. We can't detect it with the gross five senses, but we know with certainty exist. It can be shocking, like absolutely shocking, to notice what usually goes on in the background. And it can be very confronting and unsettling to the new meditator, what they now see, sense, and feel when they get quiet and allow the senses to move inward rather than outward. However, the good news, and there is good news, it is only from this vantage point that we can start to rise above the tendency of the thinking mind, the loops, the stories, the narratives, the historic, conditioned way of thinking and being, to carve out these new neural pathways of connection, of presence, of kindness, of resilience. And so, the key takeaway from everything I have just shared: don't expect your meditation to be blissful. But also, don't expect your meditation to be busy or horrible either. And so, maybe you just asked yourself the question, if I'm not expecting my meditation to be good and I'm not expecting my meditation to be bad, what am I expecting? And if you're following along, maybe that answer just clicked. Best to release both expectations, all expectations, to come in with no expectation. This is the best and only way you should ever enter a practice of meditation. Hear me out. If I expect meditation to be good and blissful and it's not, I feel like a failure. It's uncomfortable. I feel like I am inflicting unnecessary pain, struggle, and suffering, and I feel like I'm doing it all wrong. On the other hand, if I expect my meditation to be bad and busy, well, this doesn't sound fun to begin with. It feels like I'm willingly sitting down for an experience I'd probably rather not engage with, and it becomes even more appealing to not engage. Of course, disclaimer, all of this releasing expectation business, it's so much easier said than done. Of course, if your last meditation was blissful and lovely, it is very hard to wipe away that tiny slither of hope that you might go back to that beautiful, spacious, peaceful, calm Zen place where maybe you found yourself like bathing in golden light or something along those lines. And if the last meditation was horrible and filled with anxious thoughts, how can I possibly expect my next meditation to be any different? However, if we enter our next meditation based off our last meditation or based off our previous meditations, or based off what we think about meditation, or based off what someone else thinks about meditation, then we are printing our past or someone else's past onto our present. And we are actually not open to the moment whatsoever. Instead, it's almost like we're waiting for the moment, waiting for life to come and meet our expectation of how we feel something should be, based off really our very limited experience. And I don't mean limited in a way to discount or devalue our extremely inherently valuable direct experience. I use the word limited in relation to the number of years that we have spent here experiencing life in comparison to life itself, compared to the intelligence of life, to nature, which of course has been around since the beginning of time and is what we are surrendering ourselves to when we allow an experience of meditation. And so our mind's database of experience is far from objective. It's very subjective, it's very personal, and often innocently ego-driven. And so either when we go in with any kind of expectation based off our or another's experience, two things can happen. The first is that we get severely disappointed because the expectation hasn't been met. Or we experience the illusion of control, where on this particular occasion, we got what we wanted. So the best way to release expectation is to remember, regardless of how your meditation practice or experience feels, only something good is happening. And I'd like to repeat that because it's so important. Regardless of how the experience feels during meditation, only something good is happening. And this is the function of meditation. There is no meditation practice that doesn't leave you better off in some way than when you sat down, if you go in with right understanding. And even without, you will probably still benefit. It's just that we can harness, amplify, and magnify the benefit. And so the function of meditation is not necessarily to feel amazing during meditation. Its role is in informing how we can show up after, when we come back out, when we engage again with the world. Perhaps more rested, more productive, more clear, more yourself, more dialed in. I'm aware saying only something good can happen can sound maybe a little bit lovely and lofty. So let's explore it. We now know the function of meditation is to leave us better off in some way, regardless of our in-the-moment experience. And what does this mean? It means that we can trust, or better than trust, know, because inherent within trust is doubt. If I knew something, I wouldn't have to lean on trust. So maybe it starts out with trust before you have the direct experience, but eventually we know. And what we know is no matter how gratifying or ungratifying our experience, that what we are receiving is the most relevant experience, the one that is and was meant for us. That the experience we are having when we come in without expectation is the one we needed in this timeline, on this day, in this specific moment. So let's explore that, because it can be a pretty easy statement to dismiss without further investigation. So let's say we have one of those, let's call it a shallow meditation. And a shallow meditation can feel really busy, like thought-filled, where the mind is racing and your body is restless. It can feel very shallow, like we can't penetrate the surface layer of our mind to experience any depth. Well, what if we understood that all of this movement and activity was stress release? Because that's what it is. Stress in meditation prints out as heightened mental activity and restlessness in the body. And while yes, it is experienced as a far, far less gratifying experience of meditation, we can trust or eventually know that it is an unavoidably important part of meditation. The stress release, the digestion of undigested life experience that continue to build up and up and up in the background. And unless we deal with this backlog of experience, these undigested life experiences, they have no choice but to find their way out on their own, exploding out in maybe unconscious ways or unfavorable ways, in the form of, anger and anxiety or depression or emotional outbursts. And I think we can probably agree that meditation is a much more natural and graceful way to process life. So we can say a busy meditation, far less gratifying, but performing the very important function of stress release, which is ultimately one of the most needed and important functions on the planet right now. I truly, deeply believe this, especially for people living in the world like we do. It's actually scary to think of the level of stress that we normalize and walk around with every single day. And it's reflected in the number of mental health illnesses and conditions that really could be avoided if we knew ways of dealing and coping with levels or high levels of stress. And then, of course, we can experience a deep meditation. And the experience of a deep meditation, it's very restful, it's very peaceful, and it's calm. The meditation, or a deep meditation, it's characterized by a depth of awareness or calmness of mind and relaxation in the body, which is, of course, also good and far, far more gratifying, right? And so all we can ever do, the job or the function of meditation, is to set the conditions for either accumulated stress to release and the quality of relaxation, of calm, of presence, of love to spread and to expand. So, of course, both are always happening, but the one we receive more of will be dependent on the state we arrive in on that day, in that particular moment. So as you can see, in both situations, only something good is happening. It might just feel more or less gratifying. And learning to release expectation, it's a very helpful skill. We simply cannot, as hard as we may try, forecast or predict any experience. So really, there is not much point trying or worrying about what's going to happen, even though our mind might convince us otherwise. Because there are simply far too many variables to ever take into account. It's not humanly possible for our level of consciousness anyway to predict the future with any degree of accuracy. It is utterly inconceivable to account for all of the variables one would have to cater for. So in reality, having an expectation, when you think about it, is kind of fruitless or pointless, especially when it comes to meditation, because we could never know or ever work out, as hard as we tried, to figure out what is in store for us. So the best way to enter meditation is from a state of openness and total acceptance, which in its nature, this state is void of expectation. So instead of talking about your meditation experience as good or bad, instead, I invite you to use the scale of gratifying and ungratifying, and remember, only something good is happening. So the final parting key take-home and golden thread for today: before you meditate, before you sit on your meditation cushion or chair, creating less or better, no expectation of the experience of meditation you're about to embark on, and instead paying far, far more attention to how you feel after, when you engage back with the world. And remember, only something good is happening. And remember, if in your own personal practice you hit roadblocks or bumps or blocks or have questions and queries, please send me a message on Instagram or via email, whatever platform you like, because that can inform the topics I speak on and the questions I answer. Or of course, you can follow along, listen along, and I'll continue to share what I feel is most relevant. I'll see you in the next episode.